Welcome back to Zone for Geeks. My name is Casey, and in this video, we're going to build a custom template for our Zabbix monitoring tool. Before we get started, I want to point out that I am not a developer by any stretch of the imagination. While I always appreciate feedback on my videos, just know that I am fully aware of my developer shortcomings. Now, with that being said, let me explain what I'm going to do. I have a temperature sensor that returns temperature, dew point, and humidity. Zabbix doesn't have a built-in template, so I'm going to make my own. Zabbix templates are made in YAML, and it's very important that you understand when it comes to YAML files, spacing matters. So let's get started. Now I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. It's free and there'll be a link to it in the description below, but you can use any text editor that you want to use. Now on your screen here, I've gotten the basics of what every template is going to start with. So let's just go ahead and look over it real fast. So first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your version matches the version of Zabbix that you're using. I'm using version 7.0. It's relatively new, so you might still be using 6.4 or even another version, but just be aware that you do need to put in the actual version number. Notice here that we have question marks next to our uuid, which from this point on I'm just going to call IDs, and I'm going to show you where to get that, but I like to, because we need IDs for a bunch of stuff within our template, I like to just get them all at once at the end and put them in. So I put question marks in there just so I can easily find them. Next is going to be our template group. So now I made a new group called sensors, but you can use an already existing one, networking or whatever the case may be, or you can make one for your own case. And then down here, so this is going to be our template name. So I name my templates based on the device that it is going to be monitoring and the model. So I don't really name them based on the manufacturer. So I wouldn't call it like Extreme or fs.com or something like that. That's because those devices, they have lots of different products, and this template might not work for everything on there. So I like to actually give it the model that we'll be using. So in this case, it's going to be a Geist WD15. So that's going to be our template name. And then our description is, again, just a brief description of what your template does. And then again, our group is going to be part of the templates/sensor. Now, I am going to assume that you have already obtained the OID that you need for the items that you're going to be monitoring. That is beyond the scope of this video. Maybe I'll do another one in the future of how to get OIDs. But if you don't know, or if you don't have the OIDs, you will need to get those before you can continue on. So I have the three OIDs. It's going to be the temperature sensor, the dew point, and the humidity. I already have those pulled. They're saved on a file off screen, so I'm just going to copy them over when I am ready. But let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned before, spacing does matter when it comes to YAML, so make sure that you are properly spacing your items. So we're going to do items, and I'm going to do a tag here, and then we're going to once again do uuid, but in this case we're just going to do question mark, and then name. So this is going to be the actual display name of your sensor or of your item that you're going to be pulling. So in my case, it is just going to be the temperature. So I'm going to do sensor temp. And then we want to give it a type, and since we are going to be pulling this through SNMP, that's what we're going to be using. And then our SNMP OID. Once again, I'm just going to copy this from off screen. And then our key. So our key is going to be, basically it's the variable that Zabbix is going to be using. So it needs to be unique for each item. So in my case, I'm just going to call it sensor temp. And then our delay. So what this is this is how often Zabbix is going to retrieve the information from our sensor. So because a temperature sensor is really critical, then I want it to be pulled as often as possible. So I'm going to do 5 seconds. Other options, you could do D for days, you can do M for minutes, W for week, something like that. I'm going to do 5 seconds. Now, if you're monitoring something that doesn't often change, so let's say the host name, or any number of things, then you might want to only get that information once a day or once a week. In my case, I want to get it every 5 seconds. Next thing we want to add is going to be our history. So how much data are we going to store? So we're going to be pulling in data every 5 seconds, and I want it to be saved for 90 days. Now, here's what you need to understand. When it comes to data storage, your database does not take up a lot of storage space. However, if you have hundreds of different sensors and devices and hosts that you're monitoring, this can really add up. I have worked at a job where we use Zabbix, and it was around 200 gigabytes of data, and that's because they had about 150 different sensors, and if you're pulling those sensor data every few seconds, then that is really going to add up. So you will need to adjust this based on your own needs, and just keep in mind that one host is really not going to make that big of a deal. But if you have hundreds of them, then the amount of storage available to you is going to start being a concern. So just be aware of that. Now, having said that, we do have the option of doing trends. And what a trend is that instead of giving you back every single data point for our item, so if I wanted to, I can look at and see what every 5 second what was pulled back every 5 seconds. Now, if data is a storage is a concern, you can do trends. And a trend is basically just it doesn't think of it as maybe like an average. So instead of telling you that this is what every single item returned was, on average it returned this amount over the course of a day or something like that. It doesn't take a lot or as much storage space, so just be aware of that. The next item we need to add is going to be our value type. So for those of you who are programmers, you are probably familiar with things like integers and floats and strings and things of that nature. Well, in Zabbix, there's only two that I've ever used, and that's going to be float or char. So in Zabbix, a float is not just a floating point number, it is any number. So it can be 5 or it could be 5.7. Where a char is not just a single character or whatever the case may be, it is a string. So be aware of that, because it does matter how Zabbix is going to display that information. It needs to know what is actually being displayed. For example, we will be getting some graphs where we can see the information of our temperature sensor. If this were returning a string, then that graph wouldn't really display properly, because you can't graph a string. So we're going to be using float because we are going to be receiving numbers. This last one, so units, is going to be completely optional. Our number is going to, or our data is going to return, 75.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So normally it would just display 75.2. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an F at the end, which is basically just going to say it's now going to return 75.2 F. You can obviously do Celsius if you're going to be doing Celsius. Later on, we're going to actually change this to a percentage sign, because we're going to be returning a percentage. And I know that's a lot, but that's it. That is our temperature sensor. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to do the same thing for our other two sensors, so our dew point and our humidity. So I just need to change a few things. So this is going to be, we'll do humidity next. I want to grab the OID for that. And right there, we're going to change our key to, say, humidity. We're going to leave 5 seconds. Everything else is going to be the same. Now our humidity here returns a percentage. So instead of doing Fahrenheit, we're going to be doing a percentage. And the last thing, let's just change this to dew point. And grab our OID. change this again to dew point, and everything else looks good. So the last thing we need to do is we need to get our IDs. And the easiest thing to do is just to go to Google and type in uuid version 4 generator. And this is the first website that pops up. There's many of them that are out there. You can use whatever is convenient for you. I like this one because I get the option of generating more than one at a time. So let me see how many I need. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need 5. So I'm just going to slide this back over. I'm going to type in 5 and generate. And now I've gotten 5 IDs. And so I just copy each one over. And so we'll just start at the top here. And we do need to get rid of these dashes. Now I've used a couple of different generators and they all include the dashes. There's probably some out there that don't, but this is, I don't care enough to actually investigate any further than this. So this is the one that I use. I should also point out that your IDs have to be unique across all of Zabbix. Now Zabbix does have some built-in templates, and even if it's not the template that you're working on now, if these IDs are used anywhere else within Zabbix, it will generate an error message. Now this is a hexadecimal number, so the likelihood of that happening is very small, but you have to realize that Zabbix has hundreds of templates built in and thousands of different sensors. So the more you add, the more likely it is going to happen. Just be aware that it is possible. And when you go to upload your template, Zabbix will actually throw an error and tell you that there's a problem. So that's it. I'm going to save, and let's go ahead and go into our Zabbix template. Or our Zabbix server. So I'm going to come over here to templates, and we're going to do import, and I'm going to choose it, and this is just where I saved it. And so this is what we're looking for. If you see some red on here, that's okay. That just means that you're uploading a template that has already been uploaded before, and the red are things that have been removed or changed. So I'm going to hit import, and our import was successful. Now the last thing I need to do is we just need to add a host to our template. So I'm going to create a host. I'm just going to call this temp sensor. Right there will work. I'm going to choose our sensor. So if we come here, we can see our template sensors, and we only have the one. And then under our host group, I made another one called sensors. And now I'm just going to add an SNMP host. So 192.168.1.4, and everything else will be the same. And if we come over here to our data, we should hopefully, let's choose that. We should start to see some of our information pop up. So immediately I see a couple of problems. The first problem is if you look over here, if you look over here, then we're getting our number as 459, and that should be 45.9 instead of 459. Same thing down here, we're getting 755 instead of 75.5. So I'm going to show you guys how to fix that. But first, I'm just going to refresh a couple of times so you can see that this is happening every 5 seconds. Alright, so now let's fix our display issue. So what's happening here is this 459, that's just what's being pulled back from our sensor. And Zabbix doesn't do any type of formatting. Luckily, Zabbix gives us the capability of doing it ourselves. So let's go into back into our template. And what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be applying what's known as pre-processing, and we're going to be using JavaScript to actually convert this number. So right up under our units, I'm up under the sensor temperature. Remember, it's our temperature sensor and our dew point that was showing incorrectly. So I'm just going to go here, and we're just going to type in pre-processing. And I'm going to do a tack there. And now I want to tell it what we're doing. So I'm going to be using JavaScript. And then we're going to do our parameters. Make sure I spelled that right. And then another tag, and then we're going to do the line here. And so this line right here is telling it that we are going to be using a multiple lines here. So everything beyond this point should be treated as one. Now, as I mentioned before, I am not a developer. I'm sure that there is probably an easier way of doing what I'm about to do, but this is just, quick and easy for me. It's only 3 lines of code, so that's just the way that I do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in var for our variable, and I'm going to create temp value. And then I'm going to do equals number. So this is basically just going to say the number that the value that we get back, I want to make sure it's a number, it's an integer and not a string. And then I'm going to use value right here. So this variable right here, this is actually what is returned by our sensor temp data. So I could just leave this as is and just use the actual word value or the actual variable value, but I do like to have my variables make sense. And value is going to be the variable name for all of our items. So I'm creating a new variable called temp value, and that variable is pulling in our value from our sensor and making sure that it is a number. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create another variable, and we're just going to call this decimal value equals temp value divided by 10. So now this is going to, our decimal value will now have an actual decimal number. And now we just need to return the information. So we're going to do return decimal value. Now I'm going to make sure that this always returns to 2 decimal places. So I'm just going to do 2 fixed 2. And so again, what's happening, we're creating our variable, we're storing our information in that variable, and then we're taking that variable and we're dividing it by 10, and we are returning that number to 2 decimal places. And luckily, this is the exact same thing that we need to do down here. So let's just copy and paste. We do need to change a few things just to make it make sense for our new variables down here. So I'm just going to change this to dew point. Let's do this. So we'll do dew point is equal to value, and then there we go. So now this should return our decimal value. So I'm going to hit save. We're going to come back into Zabbix, and we're going to re-upload our template. And we come back into our monitoring and our latest data. We refresh, and now we can see right there we are getting 46.5 instead of 465. And we're getting 75.3 instead of 753. Now this is obviously not entirely necessary because we know that what the problem was. So we could have just left it as is and said, okay, well, it's not obviously 753 degrees, it's 75.3. But again, you want to try to do it right, and somebody looking at it might not know that. Maybe somebody comes in and you haven't told them what's going on, or you just leave and go take another job, and the next person comes in and this information is not working properly. So all right, so we are almost done. And I know this video is getting a little long, but one last thing that I want to do is I want to create a custom trigger. So a trigger in Zabbix is a notification that there's a problem. It's all well and fine that we have our sensor temperature here, but it doesn't do us much good if we don't know when our temperature gets to a point that we are uncomfortable with. So what we want to do is we want to create a trigger that will make those, or that will alert us. So now we can do this within Zabbix itself. So if we go over to our host and see our sensor temperature right there. If we click on triggers, we can actually create a new one, just like this. The problem with that is that is going to be unique, specific to this version or this installation of Zabbix. So if we wanted to share this template with a friend or a coworker, then we can't do that because our trigger is not going to be part of that template. Or if we want to, for whatever reason, create a new Zabbix installation, then our trigger is not going to be carried over because it's not part of our actual template. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add this under sensors. Now I would do this for all of my items, but because this video is already getting long, I'm just going to do one. So we're going to come over here, and under pre-processing, I'm just going to type in triggers, and then our tag, and then once again our ID. All right, so now we need to add our expression. So what is going to cause our trigger to, well, trigger? So we're going to do max, and I'm just going to type this out, and I'll explain it to you once I am done. All right, so let me explain to you what is going on here. So what I am saying is I want to take, so this is the name of our template. So our template, and this is our key. So remember, our key is going to be the variable for our item. So I want this template with this key every 12 data points. So remember, we did 5 seconds, so 12 times 5 is 60. So every 1 minute, or not every 1 minute. So basically what I'm saying, if our temperature is greater than or equal to our warning threshold, which we're going to set later, I want it to trigger. But I only want this to happen if that number is above our threshold for 12 consistent data points, so 1 minute. And the reason why I do this is because there will be a time, especially as your temperature goes up and down, where in my case I'm going to set my warning at 82 degrees. So if it goes from 81 to 82, then back down to 81 and then back up to 82, and it's bouncing back and forth, then I could get hundreds of emails within just a couple of minutes, depending on how often that's happening. And I don't want that. So now what I'm saying is, as long as our temperature is at 82 degrees or higher for 1 minute, then send me a notification. And then we're going to do a recovery expression. So when our temperature goes below that point, again for 1 minute, then let me know. And that way I just don't get those emails every few seconds. And then we will set this later on at the bottom of our template. So we've got our expression. Now we need our recovery expression. So this is going to be, it's great to be notified that there is a problem, but we also want to get notified when that problem has resolved. So we're going to do recovery mode, and then we'll do recovery expression. And then, let's see, recovery expression. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to copy this right here. So I'm going to copy that, put that there. And the only change I'm going to change is I'm going to say greater than to less than. So here we're saying if our temperature is higher than our warning threshold, and now we're saying if it's lower than our warning threshold, then that's when we want to be notified that the problem has been resolved. And now we need to give it a name. So this is going to be, when you get those notifications, if you get it in an email, this is going to be the name of the actual trigger. So that way it makes it easier for you to quickly identify. So we're going to call this high temperature warning alarm. And then we need to add op data. So operational data, that's going to be our last value that was received. So when we receive that email, it's going to say, hey, this alarm went off, so our high temperature warning alarm, and this is the last data point that we received. So we're just going to do value, and then item dot last value, and this variable right here is just built into Zabbix. And Zabbix, you can go check their documentation for a list of all of their built-in variables and macros. And then priority. So in this case, we're going to make our priority warning. And that's it. So now we have a custom trigger. But I want to do one more. So we've got our warning, and what I like to do is I like to have notification that things are starting to get bad, but then I want a notification when things are really serious. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and we're going to paste one more, and rather than a warning, I'm just going to set this for critical. And so what this is going to say is, so if my warning is set at 82 degrees, I'm going to set my critical alarm at 90 degrees. So at 82, I might get a notification that, hey, there's a problem, but at 90 degrees, everybody on my team is going to get notified, because at that point it's gone from this might be a problem to this is a problem. So I'm just going to change some wording here. And let's see, we need to change, I think that's it. So that is going to be up. We want to change our priority. So from warning, we're going to change this to high. All right, so now what we're saying is, our temperature is above 90 degrees. We want to get, notified. And then instead of just giving us a nice little warning, now it's going to give us a higher priority. And let's go ahead and do our IDs, because we will not have to do any more IDs for this video. So I've just gone back to my website. I've grabbed 2 more, and we will delete the dashes. And we'll do 1 more. Alright, so the last thing we want to do before we end this video is, so I've set this high temp warning threshold and high temp critical threshold within my trigger, but I haven't told my template what those values are. So I'm going to do that now. And what Zabbix calls this, they call them macros. So I'm going to come down here, and we're going to go to our, let's see, right there. And we're going to do macros. We're going to do our tac, and then our macro. This is going to be the name of our macro. So remember, up here we called it high temp warning threshold. So I'm just going to copy that, and it goes in curly brackets, and there we go. And then our value. So our value, once again, I told you it was going to be 82 degrees. So our value is going to be 82. And then I'm going to do 1 more, because we also had the critical threshold. So let's just copy and paste. And then we'll change this to critical. And I said it was going to be 90 degrees, so it is 90 degrees. And assuming that we haven't made any mistakes, we should be good. This should be it. And if I have made mistakes, you guys have probably already noticed it before me. So let's see what happens. So we're going to go back in. We're going to upload our template. We're going to choose it and hit import. And how about that? No mistakes. All right, so now let's go back and check our data. We want to make sure that it is still pulling our most recent data. We didn't make any mistakes that caused our information to no longer import, which it looks like we're good. So let's come over and check out our host. See right here, we now have 2 triggers. If I click on that, and I can see what they are. So we can see we've got 1 as a warning and 1 that is listed as high. And these are our trigger expressions. And now let's test it. Let's make sure that it works. So we come back over to host, and we're going to choose our sensor, And if we click on macro, and because we built this into our template, it's going to be under inherited and host macros. And we can see right there, those are to 82 and 90 degrees. Now the good thing is we can change them. So if we have a need to do that, then we can. And we do, because we want to test it. So I'm going to change our warning from 82 degrees to 70. So remember, our reading is around 75 point something. So now when I change this to 70, all of our trigger should immediately trigger, because we are now above that warning threshold of 75 or 70 degrees. So if we come back in and check out problems and just do a refresh, and right there we can see we have a problem, our temperature warning, and we can also test out our critical alarm. So once again, we'll change this, and we'll just change this to 70 also. And we go into problems and just refresh, and after the next 5-second period where that alarm gets hit, we should be notified. And there you have it. So now we have both our warning alarm and our critical alarm. If I had email notifications set up, I would get an email notification letting us know that there was a problem. If we go back into our sensor data, and I'm just going to delete this and hit update, and then that should pull our resolve all of our problems. So we'll give that a few seconds to see if that works. And there you have it. So now our issues are resolved and all is right in the world again. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment if you have any comments, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.